The morning sun peeked through the tall glass windows of the city's downtown bank. It was a weekday, and the branch already carried the rhythm of busyness that came with the early hours. Staff members moved quickly between desks, phones rang with customer calls, and the faint hum of printers filled the air. For the manager, it felt like just another normal day, a day where he expected nothing unusual. He had his schedule lined up with back-to-back meetings, paperwork to sign, and routine customer visits. Everything seemed predictable. Around mid-morning, the glass doors at the entrance slid open, and a man walked inside. He carried himself with a quiet confidence, dressed in a neat, well-fitted suit that was professional yet simple. He did not have flashy jewelry or anything loud about his appearance. His calm steps made little noise on the polished floor as he approached the reception desk. With a polite tone, he asked to meet with the branch manager. The receptionist, trained to handle requests, gave him a friendly smile and asked if he had an appointment. "Not a formal one," the man said, "but I would like to discuss opening a corporate account. It's for my company, and I was told this branch could handle larger accounts." His voice was steady and respectful, and though he didn't raise it, there was something about the way he spoke that showed he was used to making important decisions. The receptionist nodded and asked him to take a seat while she informed the manager. The man thanked her warmly and walked toward the waiting area, where a few chairs and magazines had been arranged neatly. He sat down, pulled out his phone, and began replying to a few messages. To anyone passing by, he looked like an ordinary customer waiting for his turn. When the receptionist told the manager about the visitor, the manager gave a quick glance toward the waiting area. He noticed the man sitting calmly but did not pay much attention. In his mind, it was just another walk-in client, and since he had a stack of small meetings already lined up, he did not consider this visitor a priority. He told the receptionist he would see him shortly and went back to his paperwork. Minutes turned into half an hour. Other clients who had arrived after the visitor were being attended to, while he continued to sit patiently, scrolling through his phone. From time to time, he would look up, observing the busy movement inside the bank. A child tugging at her mother's hand as they walked toward the counter, an elderly gentleman carefully filling out deposit slips, staff members rushing with files. He watched it all without complaint. To him, waiting was not unusual. As a businessman, he was used to airports, lobbies, and endless waiting rooms. Yet something about this situation was different. He noticed that the manager had come out twice to escort other customers inside for meetings, but each time he passed by, the manager avoided eye contact. Still, the man remained calm. Instead of showing any frustration, he kept working quietly from his phone, checking emails, reviewing contracts, and speaking briefly to someone on a call. An hour slipped by. The waiting area grew quieter as some of the morning crowd finished their tasks and left. A staff member offered him water, which he accepted with a smile and a soft thank you. His politeness did not fade despite the long delay. He sat with a posture of patience, almost as if he was testing how long it would take for the bank to treat him seriously. Meanwhile, in the manager's office, there was no real urgency. He thought to himself, "This visitor doesn't seem that important. He came without an appointment, so I'll get to him when I have time." His attention was fixed on smaller meetings with local business owners, account holders with modest transactions, and a few internal discussions. Each time the receptionist reminded him about the man waiting, the manager brushed it aside, saying, "Yes, I'll see him soon." By the time 2 hours had nearly passed, the atmosphere in the waiting area had shifted. A couple of customers whispered quietly, noticing that the same gentleman had been sitting there the entire time. Some even felt a little sympathy, wondering why he was being made to wait so long. Yet the man himself never complained. He checked the time, sent another email, and even gave a reassuring smile to the receptionist, as if to say, "Don't worry, I'm fine." His calmness stood out. Many people, after waiting so long, might have walked out angrily or demanded to be seen. But this man carried himself differently. He seemed to understand that patience often revealed more about people than words ever could. Finally, after what felt like an endless delay, the manager finished another small meeting and decided it was time to attend to the visitor. He stepped out of his office and called him in, wearing a polite but somewhat rushed expression. To the manager, this was just another task to check off his list. He had no idea that the person who had been waiting in silence for 2 long hours was not just another customer. As the visitor stood up and straightened his jacket, the receptionist noticed something unusual in his calm eyes, an air of quiet authority, the kind that doesn't need to be announced but is simply felt. The moment he walked into the manager's office, the stage was set for a revelation that would soon change not only the manager's perspective but also leave an unforgettable lesson for the entire bank. The clock on the wall kept ticking softly, its hands moving slowly but surely. The man in the waiting area sat quietly, his legs crossed, his phone in one hand, and a calm look on his face. By now, more than an hour had gone by since he first entered the bank. He had come in with polite confidence, introduced himself, and requested to meet the manager. Yet, despite his request, he still remained seated, waiting, as the world around him moved on. The receptionist, who had been keeping an eye on him from her desk, began to feel uneasy. She knew he had been waiting far longer than most customers usually did. Typically, anyone requesting to speak with the manager was attended to within minutes, unless there was a very urgent meeting in progress. But here was a man who had been asked to wait and then, almost strangely, seemed to be forgotten. Each time she reminded the manager, his reply was the same, "I'll see him soon." From the receptionist's desk, she could see the man open his laptop bag and begin working. His calmness was unusual. Most customers would have walked up to her desk by now to ask, "How much longer will it take?" or "Can't the manager see me already?" But he didn't. He typed quietly on his laptop for a while, answered a phone call, and then even shared a small smile when a child walked by and waved at him. It was almost as though he had all the time in the world. The staff members walking past the waiting area noticed him too. Some whispered softly among themselves. "Who is he?" one asked. "Why hasn't the manager seen him yet?" another wondered. There was curiosity but also a sense of indifference. After all, to them, he was just another customer in a suit, sitting silently and waiting for his turn. Inside his office, the manager carried on with his tasks, unaware of the impression he was leaving. He believed he was handling his priorities in the right order. "That visitor can wait," he thought to himself. "I need to finish these small meetings first." What he didn't realize was that his decision to delay was being noticed not just by the man waiting, but by the staff and even a few customers. Time passed slowly. 40 minutes became an hour, and an hour became nearly 2. The man, however, remained patient. He leaned back in his chair, took sips from the glass of water offered to him, and continued managing his work through his phone. His patience was not forced, it was natural. He seemed to understand something most people forgot, that waiting with dignity said more about a person's character than rushing or complaining ever could. A young bank employee, carrying a stack of files, glanced at him as she passed by. She later whispered to her colleague, "I don't know who he is, but he doesn't look upset at all. He's been sitting there for so long, and he still looks so calm. That's unusual." Her colleague shrugged, replying, "Maybe he's used to waiting. Or maybe he doesn't have anything else to do." But the truth was very different. The man was not someone without responsibilities or free time. On the contrary, his time was extremely valuable. Every hour mattered in his life, because he ran a company where decisions worth millions were made daily. Yet here he was, sitting in a bank lobby, showing no signs of irritation. It was not that he enjoyed waiting, but he had a quiet strength that many people missed. He believed that patience often revealed the values of others. While he sat silently, the bank staff unknowingly revealed their own. Some offered him polite smiles, while others ignored him completely. The manager, on the other hand, revealed his habit of making assumptions. As the 2-hour mark drew closer, the waiting area grew quieter. The morning rush had eased, and only a few customers now sat filling out forms. The man closed his laptop, placed it back in his bag, and folded his hands. His eyes rested briefly on the office door where the manager was seated. Still, he didn't frown or sigh. Instead, he allowed himself a moment of reflection. In that silence, he thought about how often people were judged by what they looked like, where they came from, or how they introduced themselves. He knew the manager had made assumptions about him. If he had walked in with a more recognizable name or a louder introduction, perhaps he would have been seen immediately. But he had chosen not to announce who he was. He wanted to see how he would be treated as just another visitor. The receptionist finally approached him again and said softly, "Sir, I've informed the manager. He'll see you shortly." He gave her a reassuring nod and replied, "Thank you. I appreciate it." His tone was so gentle that it eased her guilt a little. Meanwhile, the manager finished another meeting and stepped out briefly to escort a client. As he passed the waiting area, his eyes met the man's for just a second. The manager gave a small, professional smile but walked away quickly without stopping. The man returned the smile but said nothing. To anyone watching, it seemed like a small moment, but in truth, it carried weight. The manager had walked past him several times that morning without acknowledging his long wait. And the man, with quiet grace, had accepted it each time. What the manager did not realize was that this was no ordinary client. This was not someone looking to open a simple savings account or deposit a small amount. This was a man representing a company with the potential to bring in one of the largest accounts the branch had ever seen. But because of assumptions, he had been left waiting in the lobby like an afterthought. The story of that waiting period was not about boredom or wasted time. It was about patience, dignity, and the hidden test of character. The man had tested the bank without saying a word. Every delayed minute added to the weight of what would soon be revealed. Finally, as the clock moved closer to noon, the manager decided it was time. He told his assistant, "Call him in. Let's see what he wants." His tone was casual, as if he were finally ready to deal with an ordinary task he had postponed. The receptionist walked over to the man and said, "Sir, the manager is ready to see you now." The man stood up slowly, straightened his jacket, and picked up his bag. He gave the receptionist a kind smile once again before walking toward the office door. What no one in the bank realized was that the silence of those 2 hours would soon turn into one of the most talked about lessons in the branch's history. The man had waited patiently, but the moment he stepped inside, the truth about who he really was would leave everyone surprised. And that quiet waiting period, which seemed so ordinary to the staff, would soon be remembered as the time when the bank had unknowingly tested the patience of someone who could have changed its future. The office door opened with a soft sound as the receptionist guided the visitor inside. The manager stood up briefly from his desk, extending his hand in a polite but somewhat routine manner. His smile was practiced, the kind of smile he had given to countless clients before, and his tone carried the same formality he used in almost every meeting. "Good afternoon," the manager said. "Thank you for waiting. Please, have a seat." The man returned the smile with warmth, though his eyes held a quiet strength. He shook the manager's hand firmly, then sat down across the desk. His posture was relaxed, but there was something about him that made the office feel smaller, almost as though his presence carried more weight than the manager had expected. "I appreciate you making time for me," the visitor began. His voice was calm and steady, the kind that instantly commanded attention without effort. "I've been considering which financial institution to work with for my company's next step, and this branch was one of the options I wanted to explore." The manager nodded politely, reaching for a notepad. "Of course," he said. "We'd be happy to help. May I ask the nature of your company and the type of account you're interested in?" There was no impatience in the visitor's reply. He simply leaned forward slightly and said, "It's a corporate account." My company has grown quickly over the last few years, and we are now in need of a financial partner who can manage larger transactions, investments, and payroll services. We're looking for reliability, professionalism, and respect. The manager, though still professional in appearance, felt a small ripple of curiosity. He asked, "And what company do you represent, if I may know?" For the first time since entering the bank, the man spoke his full name, followed by the name of his company. The manager's pen froze above the notepad. He had heard that name before. In fact, it was a name often mentioned in local business circles, highlighted in newspapers, and even spoken of in boardroom meetings. The company was not small, it was one of the fastest growing technology firms in the city, with a reputation for innovation and success. The manager blinked, his practiced smile faltering slightly. "Ah, I see," he said, his tone changing almost instantly. He leaned back in his chair, now giving the man his full attention in a way he had not done before. The visitor continued, unfazed by the shift. "We've reached a point where we're moving millions through our operations every month. Our team has been considering several banks to open a new corporate account. We're not only looking at numbers, we're also looking at relationships. We want to know if the institution we choose values us the way we value our partners." The weight of those words settled into the room like a quiet thunder. The manager realized, with growing unease, that the man sitting in front of him was no ordinary client. He was someone who had the power to bring immense business to the branch, business that could raise its profile, boost its numbers, and bring recognition to the staff. Yet this same man had been left waiting in the lobby for nearly 2 hours. The manager's thoughts raced. How could I not have realized? How could I have treated him like just another walk-in customer? He forced a broader smile and leaned forward, trying to correct his earlier mistake. "We would be honored to have your business with us," he said quickly. "Our bank has excellent corporate services, and I'd be glad to personally oversee your account. We can tailor solutions to meet all of your company's needs." But the visitor did not rush to respond. He sat quietly, letting the silence stretch for a moment before speaking. His calm gaze did not waver. "I have no doubt your bank has the technical ability," he said softly. "The question is whether it has the culture of respect that companies like mine require. Respect for your time. Respect for our people. Respect for what we bring to the table." The words landed heavily. The manager shifted uncomfortably, realizing that the man was not only speaking about financial services but also about what had just happened outside his office door. The visitor went on, his voice still calm but carrying more meaning with every word. "You see, I waited today. I waited patiently. And I observed. I watched how your staff treated me, how the process unfolded, and how easily assumptions were made. I'm not someone who believes respect should be demanded loudly. I believe it shows itself naturally, in the small ways people treat others, whether they think that person is important or not." The manager swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. He knew exactly what the visitor was pointing to. The long wait, the casual dismissals, the lack of urgency. Every choice had reflected an assumption, one that now felt embarrassing under the weight of the truth. "I could have introduced myself differently when I arrived," the man continued. "I could have walked in and declared my position, my company's size, and the numbers we're dealing with. If I had done that, I'm sure I would have been seen immediately. But I didn't. I wanted to see if this bank values every client equally. Whether big or small, whether familiar or unfamiliar." The room was quiet, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. The manager's practiced confidence had faded completely. He felt a deep discomfort, realizing how his decisions that morning had revealed more than he intended. Finally, the visitor leaned back, folding his hands calmly on the desk. His eyes met the manager's, and though his expression was not angry, it carried an undeniable strength. "I came here to see if this could be the right place for my company. And in a way, I did get my answer. Just not the one you expected." The manager's heart sank. He wanted to say something, to explain, to apologize, but the weight of the situation made words stumble in his mind. He realized that the very client he had made wait unnecessarily was not only influential but also deeply observant. The man stood slowly, his movements calm and deliberate. He picked up his bag and gave a polite nod. "Thank you for your time," he said. "I will let you know my decision soon." With that, he turned and walked out of the office, leaving behind an atmosphere heavy with realization. The receptionist looked up as he passed by, and he gave her another kind smile before stepping out of the bank. Inside the office, the manager sat frozen for a long moment. He knew he had just witnessed something significant. The visitor had not raised his voice, had not complained, and had not demanded attention. Instead, he had revealed his identity with quiet dignity, and in doing so, he had exposed the flaws in the way the bank had treated him. What had seemed like just another ordinary meeting had turned into a revelation. And the manager understood that the impact of this moment would not remain within the walls of his office. It would soon ripple outward, touching everyone in the bank and beyond. The office door closed softly behind the man, leaving the manager sitting alone at his desk. For a long moment, silence filled the room. The manager stared at the notepad where he had scribbled the visitor's name, along with the name of the company. The letters seemed to glow on the page, reminding him of the importance of the person he had just met. He leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath, his mind racing through everything that had just happened. He knew he had made a mistake. Not in the technical sense. He had followed the day's schedule, completed his meetings, and worked through his list of tasks. But in the deeper sense, he had failed to recognize the value of the man who had been sitting patiently in the waiting area for nearly 2 hours. He had judged him too quickly, placing him lower on his list of priorities simply because the visitor had not announced his importance. As the realization sank in, the manager felt a sense of unease. What if he chooses another bank? What if this opportunity slips through our hands because of how I handled today? The thought was unsettling. A partnership with such a fast-growing company could mean more than just financial numbers. It could mean prestige, trust, and recognition for the entire branch. And now, all of that seemed at risk. Meanwhile, in the lobby, the visitor walked with his usual calmness. His steps were steady, his expression composed. The receptionist gave him a look of respect mixed with quiet regret, as though she wanted to say something but held back. He gave her a kind nod before leaving the building. His politeness never wavered, even after the long wait and the less than warm reception. When he stepped outside, the sunlight touched his face, and he paused for a moment. He wasn't angry. He wasn't bitter. Instead, he was reflective. He thought about how small moments revealed big truths. For him, the 2 hours in the waiting area had been more than just wasted time. It had been a test, one that showed him how people behaved when they thought no one important was watching. Back inside, the staff began whispering quietly about what had just happened. Some had recognized the name of the company when they overheard it. A few employees exchanged wide-eyed looks, realizing they had unknowingly witnessed something significant. One of them said softly, "Did you hear who that was? That's the CEO of that tech company everyone's been talking about." Another nodded, adding, "And he was sitting right here for 2 hours. Imagine that." The whispers reached the manager's office within minutes. He knew his staff was already aware of the situation, and soon, the story would spread beyond the branch. The thought made his heart sink even more. Later that day, when the rush had calmed down, the manager called his team together for a short meeting. His face was serious, his voice more thoughtful than usual. "What happened today," he began, "was a lesson for all of us. A man came in, not loudly, not demanding anything, just requesting to speak with me. And we made him wait. We didn't value his time the way we should have. And now, we know who he really was." The staff listened quietly. Some nodded, others looked down at their desks, feeling the weight of the moment. The manager went on, "Respect is not something we should give only after we know someone's title or background. Respect should be the same for everyone, whether it's a small customer or the head of a large company. Today, we failed to show that. For many of the employees, those words struck a chord. They realized that their behavior, though polite on the surface, had not been equal. They had allowed assumptions to guide them, and now, they understood how damaging that could be. Meanwhile, the visitor reflected on the day in his own way. That evening, as he sat in his office surrounded by the glow of computer screens and the quiet buzz of his team, he replayed the experience at the bank. He thought about the receptionist who had tried her best to be helpful, the employees who had whispered curiously, and the manager who had finally seen him but only after hours of waiting. He spoke to one of his close advisors about it. "It's interesting," he said. "People reveal their values not when they think they're being tested, but when they believe no one important is watching. Today, I saw how much my time was valued before they even knew who I was. That tells me more than any brochure or presentation ever could." His advisor nodded. "So, what will you do? Will you still consider working with them?" The man smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Business is about trust. And trust begins with respect. If that's missing at the very start, it's hard to build anything lasting." The next morning, when the manager arrived at the bank, he found himself replaying the previous day again and again. He felt a strong need to correct what had happened, but he also knew some mistakes were not easily undone. The visitor had left politely, but his calm words had carried meaning far beyond the surface. Throughout the day, customers came and went as usual, but the atmosphere inside the branch had changed. Every staff member, from the receptionist to the tellers, seemed more thoughtful, more cautious about how they treated people. They greeted clients with genuine warmth, not just routine politeness. They offered help more quickly, avoiding unnecessary delays. It was as though the entire branch had been quietly shaken awake. For the manager, the turning point was not just about losing a potential client, it was about realizing that his actions had sent a message, even without words. And that message had been clear: assumptions had guided him, instead of respect. In the days that followed, he carried that realization with him. Every time a customer walked through the door, he reminded himself silently, every person deserves to be treated as if they matter because they do. As for the visitor, his story of patience and quiet dignity began to spread. Other banks heard about how he had been treated and reached out to him, eager to show that their values were different. He listened politely to each offer, but in his heart, he had already made his choice. He would place his company's trust where respect was given freely, not where it had to be earned through titles and introductions. The turning point had come not with anger or confrontation, but with calm honesty. A man had waited silently, revealed himself without pride, and walked away with dignity. In doing so, he had left behind a lesson that no one in that bank would ever forget, that true respect is shown in the simplest moments, often when we least expect it. The days after the meeting were anything but ordinary for the bank. The man who had walked in quietly, waited patiently, and left with calm dignity had left behind more than just a memory. He had left behind a story. And that story began to travel, first through the staff, then through the customers, and finally into the wider community. Employees whispered about it when the bank was quiet. Some said, "I still can't believe he was sitting there for 2 hours, and none of us realized who he was." Others added, "It wasn't about who he was, really. It was about how we treated him before we even knew. That's what made the difference." Soon, even customers who hadn't been present that day began hearing about it. The story spread in the way true stories often do, through conversations, retellings, and quiet lessons shared over coffee tables and workplace discussions. People were amazed by the calmness of the man, impressed by the patience he had shown, and surprised by the way he had revealed his true identity. For the manager, the days that followed were filled with deep reflection. He replayed the meeting again and again in his mind, recalling the steady voice of the visitor and the calm words that carried so much meaning. He remembered how the man had said, "Respect is not something to be given only after you know who someone is. It should be given from the start." Those words stayed with him, echoing in his thoughts as he moved through his daily tasks. At first, the manager had hoped there might still be a chance. He imagined that perhaps the visitor would call back, or that the company might still consider opening an account despite the poor impression. But as the days stretched into a week, no such call came. Instead, he heard from colleagues in the banking industry that the company had chosen another institution, one that had welcomed them warmly from the first moment, without hesitation or delay. The news stung. The manager knew that the loss was not just about the numbers, though those numbers were significant. It was about reputation. It was about trust. It was about the image of the branch he led. He realized that the entire situation could have been different if he had chosen respect over assumption, if he had treated the visitor with the same attention he gave to others. Inside the bank, the atmosphere continued to shift. Employees became more careful with every client who walked through the door. They began greeting people with genuine smiles, asking if they needed help, and ensuring no one was left waiting unnecessarily. The receptionist, in particular, carried the memory of that day strongly in her heart. She made sure to handle every visitor with equal kindness, no matter how they introduced themselves. For her, the lesson was clear: every person who enters the bank carries a story, a life, and a value that cannot always be seen at first glance. Meanwhile, outside the bank, the visitor went on with his life as usual. His company continued to grow, his team expanded, and his influence spread into new markets. He did not waste time speaking badly about the bank that had made him wait. That was not his way. Instead, he let the experience stand on its own. He knew that the people who needed to learn from it would do so. And in truth, the story itself carried the lesson better than any complaint ever could. The bank, however, felt the impact in more ways than one. Not only had they lost a valuable client, but they also faced quiet but clear questions from the community. Customers would sometimes ask politely, "Is it true what happened here with that CEO?" Staff members would shift uncomfortably but answer with honesty. And though no one accused the bank directly, the weight of the story became a reminder that hung in the air each day. For the manager, the lesson grew deeper with time. He began to notice small things he had ignored before: the way a customer's face brightened when treated with respect, the way trust was built through simple kindness, and the way assumptions could silently break relationships before they even began. Months later, when he spoke at a small business event in the community, the manager chose to share the story not with embarrassment, but with honesty. He told the audience, "A man once came to my branch. I made him wait because I assumed he was just another walk-in. Later, I discovered he was the CEO of one of the fastest growing companies in the city. I lost his business that day. But I gained a lesson I will never forget: treat every person with respect, no matter what you think you know about them. Because every person deserves it, and you never know who might be sitting in front of you." The audience listened quietly, many nodding in agreement. The story touched them because it was real. It was not about numbers or profits, it was about values. It was about how small actions, even something as simple as making someone wait, could reveal much larger truths. As for the visitor, he never returned to that branch, but he didn't need to. His presence had already done its work. His quiet patience, his steady words, and his dignified departure had left a mark far deeper than any contract or transaction ever could. Without raising his voice, without showing anger, he had changed the culture of an entire bank. Over time, the story became almost like a lesson passed down within the branch. New employees would hear it during training, told by older staff as a reminder: never judge anyone by how they look, how they walk in, or how they introduce themselves. Treat everyone with the same respect. Remember what happened here once. The bank never forgot, and neither did the manager. In his heart, he carried the regret of that day, but he also carried the change it brought. And though the visitor had chosen another institution for his company's business, his impact lived on inside the very walls he had once walked through. In the end, the outcome was bigger than money or accounts. It was about a shift in perspective. A man had come to open a corporate account, but instead, he had opened the eyes of an entire branch. And that was worth more than any balance sheet could measure. The world outside the bank continued moving, as it always does. But for those who had been there that day, the memory remained vivid: the man in the neat suit, sitting calmly for 2 hours, revealing himself as someone far greater than anyone had guessed, and walking away with dignity.